In one of his short stories, Ernest Hemingway, the short story is The Capital of the World, Ernest Hemingway tells the story of a young man who wrongs his father. He runs away from home to the capital city of Spain, Madrid. Out of great love for his son, the father puts an ad in the Madrid newspaper. It reads, "Paco, meet me, Hotel Montana, 12 noon, Tuesday, all is forgiven. Love, Papa." Well, Paco is a very common name in Spain. And so when the father arrives at the Hotel Montana, there are 800 young men waiting for their fathers. We long for forgiveness, to be able to receive it and to be able to forgive. If that's so, why is it so blasted hard to do? It isn't any easier for the first followers of Jesus. Peter comes to Jesus and he says, "Lord, if someone tools me around, how long do I allow them to do that before I stop forgiving them? 7 times? You see, the rabbinic teaching of the time said that you had to forgive 3 times, and then you could stop forgiving. So Jesus' answer is quite startling. Oh no, Peter, not 7 times, but 77 times. Well, the literal Greek can actually be translated 77 times or 70 times 7, which is 490 times. Now, I want everyone to know that I take the words of Jesus very seriously, and I'm keeping track. And there are some of you who are already pushing the limit. Some of you are over 400. And you know who you are. Now, I'm glad you're laughing, because the teaching of Jesus is just the opposite. Jesus says, don't keep track. Don't hold on to resentment. Instead, treat one another the way God treats you. But this is very hard to do. How do people live out forgiveness for the especially brutal Al-Qaeda faction, ISIS, that is now terrorizing the world? How does this community live out forgiveness when we mention the names of Columbine or Aurora or Arapaho? How is it that we live out forgiveness for the victims of broken trust, as in abuse or drunken driving? And yet these are the easy ones. I mean, it's much, much harder to deal with forgiveness when it's up close and personal. It's not dealing with foreign powers or policy, not major national tragedies, not headline-worthy offenses, but rather dealing with the hurts that are inflicted by us, inflicted by those that are close to us, whether fathers or mothers, brothers or sisters, by children, by partners, by co-workers, those with whom we have daily contact. How do you live out forgiveness then? C.S. Lewis once wrote, "I recently discovered that I had finally forgiven someone after 30 years of trying, and it felt like a miracle." Well, my miracle was 12 years in coming. Next year, my husband Bob and I will celebrate 25 years of marriage. But both of us were married previously. I married Reverend Kirk McNeil in December 1983 and hyphenated my name, Janet Forbes McNeil. It was a Scottish wedding. He supported me through seminary at Vanderbilt and into my first appointment as the associate minister in Grand Junction, Colorado. We lived a commuter marriage for 5 of the 7 years that we were together. He worked for one of our denominational agencies and traveled around the world. I worked out of Grand Junction. He lived in Nashville. When we were finally able to live together, we discovered that we had grown apart and wanted different things. I was 3 years into my first appointment, and I loved the work of a pastor. I wasn't ready to stop. At 13 years my senior, he was ready to try a new adventure and wanted us to start a business together in meeting and event planning. Well, we separated 3 weeks before my ordination. He drove from Grand Junction to Nashville, Tennessee, where he lives today. Well, on that long cross-country drive, he got angry. He made 25 telephone calls to church authorities with reasons why I should not be ordained a pastor in the United Methodist Church. He charged those calls to my account. My ordination committee contacted me and said that they would have to review the decision on whether to ordain me or not. My parents were already driving across the country from North Carolina. We had rented a bus from Grand Junction to come to the service in Fort Collins. The programs were printed, and there was my name. Well, I think I could have forgiven his anger when my committee chairman called and notified me that they would indeed be moving forward with the ceremony. This was 2 days before the ordination. After all, they said persons who separate and are moving towards divorce can act out. However, when the bus from Grand Junction arrived at the ordination service, a friend told me that Kirk was coming to the service to protest. He was planning to publicly object when the bishop inquired of the congregation, "Do you trust that these persons are worthy, by God's grace, to be ordained?" Well, 15 minutes before the service began, guards were posted at all the doorways, and the bishop was briefed that he might have a dissenter, and I went to the bathroom and was sick. Of course, he did not come, but he succeeded in spoiling one of the most significant moments in my life. I am grateful for the beautiful singing of the Lord's Prayer. Did you hear the petition about forgiveness? We say it every week. "And forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us." And in the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew asked the very same question. Right after the text, he says, "Now, did you hear that petition about forgiveness?" He writes, "For if you forgive others their trespasses, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. But if you do not forgive others, neither will your Father forgive your trespasses." Dear ones, I was a pastor of the church, and in my years of resistance at forgiving Kirk, I wondered whether there was ever any grace for me. I have now come to understand that I was misreading that passage. I have come to understand that this statement has nothing to do with the hardness of God's heart. That is not what this is about. This is about the hardness of our own hearts. The bitterness that I nurture poisons my heart, making it impossible for God to get in. Unless, that is, I can find some way to lance that bitterness and let that poison leak away. In the end, it's my bitterness that holds God at bay, and everyone else as well. To err is human, to forgive divine. which is another way of saying that forgiveness is godly work. Never are we more godlike than when we offer forgiveness. And apart from the power of God, we are not able to do it. Apart from the power of God, we are not able to do it. It's that hard. It really is. In your worship program, I offer 10 tenets for forgiveness. Not 10 commandments, but 10 ways to frame forgiveness as the core commitment of a community that seeks to follow Jesus. Now, you may find that these are very hard to live with, but I think at least in our heads, we can accept these first 5, I think. And here they are. Forgiveness is not easy. It takes time and it takes effort. Forgiveness is not forgetting. We do not forgive and forget. It doesn't mean a change in memory. It means a change in heart. Forgiveness does not overlook evil. In other words, it is not avoidance. It is not denial. One of the flip comments that you hear today is, it's all good. Well, dear ones, it's not always all good, is it? Forgiveness is not destructive. It doesn't mean that we let the damage continue. We say, stop it, and mean it. Forgiveness is not the same thing as approval. In fact, the reason that we need forgiveness is that we don't approve. Something has happened that we don't approve of. We will not approve of it, ever. But what we can do is forgive. Now, that's the first 5. But it gets more difficult. Which of these next 5 do you not only have trouble living with, but which ones would you say that you're not even sure you can accept? Forgiveness is based on recognizing and admitting that people are always bigger than their faults. In other words, I can't define people by just the way they have treated me. There is more to their lives than that. Forgiveness is willing to allow the person who has offended me to start over again. Or do I say, no, no room, no second chances. I will not let go and let you begin again. Forgiveness recognizes the humanity of the person who has wronged me. It also recognizes my own humanity, my own shortcomings, and my own contribution to what went wrong. Dang. Forgiveness surrenders the right to get even. And finally, forgiveness means we wish the person who has hurt us well. In fact, we wish them the best. This is pretty tough stuff. Pretty hard to live up to. But Jesus says that the foundation for it, the motivation, the energy that allows it to happen, the power that fuels it and founds forgiveness is in trying to treat others the way God treats us. But it is still very hard. So you might start with compassion. We can begin to forgive if we can understand another's choices. And compassion makes that possible. Compassion is not feeling sorry for another person. Compassion is feeling alongside another person. If for just a moment, you could glimpse things through their eyes. For just a moment, if you could hurt with something of their feelings. For just a moment, if you could walk in their shoes. For just a moment, if you could look at the world or the incident that happened from their confused, complicated, and slightly distorted viewpoint, instead of looking at the world from your confused and complicated and slightly distorted viewpoint. And then you might begin compassion. The second way is humor. You know, it's hard to imagine someone who is good-natured about life but miserly about forgiveness. Forgiveness is very close to humor because in both of them, it requires this kind of double vision. We can see the bad, what's out of kilter, but we can also see the good and are able to smile. That's why there are so many good news, bad news jokes. I know things are wrong between us, but let's reframe it. Let's look at it this way. Rodney Dangerfield goes to his doctor and says, "Doctor, there's something the matter with me. Every time I look into the mirror, I get a stomach ache and I want to throw up." And the doctor replies, "Well, look at it this way, your eyesight is perfect." A little more tender humor. In the biography of the comedian Woody Allen, John Baxter is praised for his analysis of the Jewish Holocaust. And he writes, "After the death camps, there are at least 6 million reasons not to ever laugh again. And there are at least 6 million reasons to try and laugh one more time." No pit is so deep that God isn't deeper still. No forgiveness is so difficult that God has not been there first. No wound is so bad that our God does not invite us to healing from within and release. So I recommend the 7 steps to forgiveness. Practice these over and over and over again. It's a process. I worked this process for a long time, again and again, in trying to release my grip on Kirk. In counseling, in a funeral ritual with friends, we had a funeral, and then we had a wake. The wake was better. And in new relationships, again and again and again. But I knew I wasn't done, because every time I would attend an ordination service, my stomach would make flips. And I was angry again. 12 years after our separation, in the summer of 2001, I got an email from Kirk. "I need your help. Can we talk?" Without hesitancy, I dialed the number that he gave me. His 3rd marriage was failing. His therapist said that he didn't understand or wasn't over our marriage yet. Would I help him? We talked for 2 hours. And I realized in the middle of that phone call that for the first time in 12 years, my heart wasn't racing, my palms weren't sweating, and I wasn't going to be sick. Forgiveness finally released me. And now, 25 years later, I can attend a service of ordination and smile. At the same time, I remember the pain. I'll always remember. I remember and give thanks for this man and for who he is today. And I remember why I chose in 1983 to link my life with his. That is a miracle. Have patience. Have patience with the process. Have patience with yourself. Forgiveness induces healing that has its own timeliness and order. And every time you do, you think you have accomplished something, but that is less important than the fact that you have attempted a radical act that will call forth changes that will surprise even you. Thanks be to God. Amen.